Welcome. Welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing? I see you, Howard. You are right at the top of my screen. I'm going to unmute you so I can say hi to you.
I'm wearing your Disability Voices United mask.
Oh, I love it so much. Look at you. Yay, that's so great, Howard. And if you too want to get a Disability Voices United mask, you can purchase one. I'll put on mine too. You can purchase this beautiful Disability Voices United mask on our website.
And Judy, I really would like to do that presentation on the paradigm shift of a regional center for Disability Voices United.
I agree. You would be perfect for that, Howard. I love it. I love it. Yeah. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're just letting everybody in. In the meantime, while you're coming in, please select a language. You can go to the bottom and choose English or Spanish. And if you are hearing me fine, that's great, except that if we have Spanish interpretation into English, you will not hear the English. So you must select English, okay? So everybody, let me start off by saying, shock, Ed is on vacation. How dare she go on vacation? But she is on vacation, and it is well deserved. And we have two, because she can't just do one, not one person can take her place, two people take her place. So we have Nina Spiegelman, our program director here, who will be monitoring the chat and helping me host this lovely event. And we have Christina, our amazing UCLA intern, who is going to be handling everything, posting things in the chat and taking care of any kind of technical issues that you may have. So don't start saying, where's Ed? Because she ain't here this week. She is visiting her parents for the first time in a very long time. She's from Pennsylvania, and she's having a great time. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. For those of you who've never been to an SDP Connect, in fact, I'd love to know if you have, actually, strike everything I said. First of all, I'm very sleep deprived, so I cannot claim to be able to have full attention or articulate things coming out of my mouth. But I want to ask Lorna to just say in Spanish how people can select their language. So let's start with that first. Thank you, Lorna. So welcome everyone again. I would love to know if this is the first time you have ever been to an SDP Connect, and you can tell us that by either going down to the bottom of your screen, clicking on raise hand by going to reactions and raising hand, like I just did, or you can put your name in the chat and say it's my first SDP Connect. If you were at Disneyland, you get a little button that says my first trip to Disneyland, but we're not Disneyland. Great. Welcome, Tammy. Welcome, Margarita. Welcome, Maria. We're so happy to have newcomers to our little family here. So thank you all. What we do is we generally meet every other week in we gather together. And what we try to do is to learn together. Things change. Everybody should know things change all the time. And so we try to stay up to date on the latest information that exists around the self-determination program. We normally meet, as I said, every other week, but because everybody's excited to get started with the self-determination program, in the next couple weeks, less than a couple weeks, that we've been meeting every week, and we'll continue to do so until after the 1st of July, and then we will go back to our every other week at least. In the last few weeks, I've been giving updates on the budget, because the budget has a profound impact on the self-determination program. And what we're seeing is that we have no information. We have no new information for you, because of the fact that what happens at the very end of the budget cycle is that the legislature just kind of locks down, and only a few people are in the room where it happens, as Connie Lapin likes to say. And so, and those people are very high level people, directly working with the governor, directly working with the president of the Senate and the speaker of the assembly. So they have locked down. They're not leaking any secrets that are coming out of it, and we don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you what I think and what I'm getting a sense of, and what I'm hearing. And that is that the wonderful ARPA spending plan that I've been telling you about in the last few weeks, that has all the things we've been asking for in areas of accountability, equity, outcomes-based, person-centered planning. There is not enough money to do all those wonderful things and to give all those rate increases that the service providers have asked for. And so what's likely to happen is that money is likely to go to service providers and not to the reforms that we've requested. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the forms we've requested will not get funded. There may be a few that get funded, small ones, but it is we should not get our hopes up that we're going to win this. We're going to win this, and I'm pretty sad about it, I must admit. But it teaches us a lesson that, people with disabilities and families who are the system are not always the ones listened to by people in power. And so we have to do something about that. And that's what DVU's plans are, is to actually do something about that and let them know, let our leaders know that that we are the system. The system is about people with disabilities and then their families, and that the people who are paid to be in our system, like service providers and regional centers, are here to support us, not to rule us. And so that's what self-determination is all about. And I wish I had better news. I don't have anything specific, though. I don't know what to tell you about whether the $2.5 million is going to be funded for person-centered planning, because everything is on the table right now, folks. It's not just that spending plan from the American Rescue Plan Act. Everything is on the table. So restoring social rec, the ombuds person, all that stuff is on the table, and we don't know what we're going to get and what we're not going to get. DVU has made our concerns known very clearly of what our priorities are. We last week sent our priorities around to many different legislative staff and to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and we hope that they're listening to us. I cannot promise if they are. And there's a whole bunch of money in there. There's also the ombudsperson for the self-determination program, which could have been an ombudsperson for the whole system, the traditional system too. We don't know exactly where that stands. We don't know whether regional centers are going to get the 80% of the money on the self-determination program, all those service coordinators, or whether regional centers are going to get those other 400 service coordinators they were hoping to get. And so I wish I had better news.
Judy, before you move on from legislation, there's a few questions coming in, I think, related directly to legislation that you might want to comment on. And there's a question on, is the July 1st date still July 1st date still good? Will there be transition funding? That sort of thing.
Right. So the July 1st date, because there's not a cost associated with it, I'm 100% confident that that's going to happen. And so the way that legislation happens, the way that budgets are produced or any kind of legislation, is that you have the state legislature, which is the assembly and the Senate, and you have the governor, and they have to agree to a budget. So the legislature passes a budget and the governor has to sign that budget. And I think that there's a lot of disagreements for sure. Not even just in our system, there's disagreements on, $10 billion to fight homelessness. And, there's Medi-Cal for undocumented, younger undocumented people. There's a lot of disagreements between the legislature and the governor. So it's not just our field, but something that costs no money that has been agreed. So that July 1st date came from the governor and the legislature put it in their budget. So that's been agreed to and there's no cost associated with it. That tells me that it is definitely going to happen. If there was that July 1st date had a cost of $10 billion, then that money is on the table. So we are, so here's where, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but that July 1st date, I'm highly confident about. Now that's $2,500 to start. So I don't know why, but I'm feeling good about that. And the reason why is, first of all, it's only $2.5 million. That's not a lot of money. That's really, really not a lot of money. And I think that will probably get in, compared to the $1.6 billion for the rate increases. That's really not a lot. And it was in the governor's budget and it was in the legislature's budget. So there is an agreement on those specifics, but there is always a chance that it is still on the table. We're going to know more, I believe, in the next, I would say in the next 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours. Okay. So any more questions before we move on?
No, I think we're good for things related to the legislation.
Okay. I'm sorry, just texting my husband. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you before we get into just answering your questions about the self-determination program is that just today, DDS released their latest numbers in the self-determination program. And I wanted to, in case you're not on their list, I wanted to share it with you. So you'll see that the numbers have not improved particularly. I can't remember what last month was, but it was like 565 or something. So really a very small amount of people have moved in the last month. And you'll see that there are still shockingly 3 regional centers that still have less than 10 people in the program. The first one is Alta Regional Center, which is one of the largest regional centers in the state. They had selected 268 people and still have less than 10 people who've moved in. Obviously, and less than 10 people who have a certified budget. I mean, you should obviously have higher numbers of people who have a certified budget than who are going into the program. So obviously, if you all are from Alta Regional Center, and I'm looking at you, Janelle, that is really like what's going on there. North Bay Regional Center is also less than 10, but of course their total number selected is 88. So it's not good, but still. And then GGRC can't seem to move up either. They have around the same, they have 89 selected and they can't seem to get above that. We don't know how many, by the way, they have. It's anywhere between 1 and 10. And once it's 11, they'll put the number there, but it's between 1 and 10. Oh, Connie, did you want to say something, or Harvey? I don't know which one of you.
I have to say something. Shameful, but besides that, there's you can rectify it. we've missed the boat on one thing. Frank Lanterman, who we've talked to about this a long time ago, the whole intention of the Lanterman Act was to have local control, to bring it down to the people in certain communities. Mammoth Lakes, for example, has different needs than the San Fernando Valley. Okay, that was the purpose of 21 regional centers. There are advisory committees that supposedly have some authority. The department isn't going to give leadership on this. I'm telling you that now. It would have happened by now. Each advisory committee can go to the board of directors of their regional center and have that board demand that the director give timelines on how to get into the program. A couple of regional centers have done that already. Mm-hmm. This is how it can happen on a local level because the board of directors hire and fire the director. It can happen. It's shameful. And what we have to do is really direct our attention to each advisory committee. And that's something you're good at, Judy, because even if it rolls out July 1, what safety net do we have that people are going to start to enroll in the program? That in itself is our safety net, the numbers of people in self-determination.
Yeah. Did you raise your hand, Fernando? Yeah.
I did. I was just following in what Harvey was communicating, and he actually brought up a good point that in these regional centers where the director and who is responsible for everyone and everything reports to the board, then what type, if any, communication does the board at the regional center have with the self-determination committees? Because it seems like there should be some type of dialogue on accountability there so that it can be pushed down. So does anybody have any kind of information on that?
Well, you know, the local advisory committees are only advisory committees. They have no authority, but they are there to provide oversight. I have been to many of the local advisory committee meetings around the state, and not all, but some of them are controlled by the regional centers, the regional center staff. So obviously you're not providing oversight if the regional center is literally telling you word for word what to say at a meeting. So, you know, the committees are there to ask questions. The committees are there to, you know, ask not only questions of the staff, but to ask questions of the community. One of the things I also wanted to report on was on Tuesday, there was a meeting. Well, let me go through this and then I'll report on the meeting from Tuesday. So just so that people can understand this chart, so this chart, by the way, by next month will become irrelevant. Many of these columns will become irrelevant because there will be no SDP spaces anymore because it's open to the whole state. There will be no more total selected and no more total withdrawals and no more continuing participants either. It really will become a very different chart, which will basically be, you know, what's the total number of consumers and then what's the total number of participants with, you know, who have an individual budget certified, completed the orientation. So we'll see some of these columns, but we will not, it won't be, you know, percentages. So, you know, in some cases, regional centers are collecting interest lists. I think that's irrelevant. I did hear an interesting little fact today. I don't know if I'd call it a fact, but an interesting piece of news that one regional center is saying, our staff is so busy that we don't have time to bring everybody in to the regional center, I'm sorry, into the self-determination program at the same time. And so you cannot go in until you have your annual IPP, which is the month of your, you know, birthday. So If you were born in June, you will have to wait a year at that regional center to go in. So I've already pushed back on that. If any of you are hearing from your regional centers that same thing, please let me know and I'll reach out to DDS. That's illegal. There, you can't, if somebody voluntarily wants to go into the self-determination program, they don't have to wait till their IPP. First of all, the Land Termination Act allows you to have an IPP anytime you ask for it. So you can have an annual IPP, but you can also have an emergency IPP if your needs change, which obviously in the self-determination program, they would. Nina, can I have you go over this? I have to take a call, a really urgent call. So I'm gonna mute myself. You keep going over the chart. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to point out that we are getting certainly some comments here from about the problems at Alta Regional Center and the issues about that. I assume when Tammy Bradley says that the Self-Determination Advisory Committee always has staff attend, I assume that means from the regional center. And I know that a lot of people have reported that that can be very kind of inhibiting to sometimes to really going over problems. And also, you know, I think that there's also another, what looks like a very typical problem, which is that, you know, the regional center is saying we're waiting on DDS. I mean, other regional centers, you can see in the chart, if you look over to the, you know, to the far right, there are pretty dramatic differences. I mean, none of it is the greatest, but there are differences. And certainly some regional centers have managed one way or another to get people through into the program, you know, completely through, or at least further along. So, you know, some of these regional centers, I think we have to, you know, keep pushing on all fronts to raise this to DDS. I mean, things cannot just go there to die. And that is clearly what is happening in some, you know, in some areas here. So I'm just checking through here just to make sure that.
Nina, I'm back, but the person's calling me back. So
okay.
I may have to jump
I was
off
just
again.
trying to, you know, there's been a lot of comments about Alta and some of those issues. And to me, it's very stark that some regional centers can get their act together one way or another and others cannot. So, you know, I do think that, you know, I still think no matter what, you know, attending the local advisory committees and getting involved in that, that has to be the forum in which we keep going for that sort of thing. In terms of, you know, these numbers, and I mean, we have to just keep, these are supposed to be reported, I think monthly, but, you know, it's so far moving in such a snail's pace. And I do want to hear, I wasn't able to attend. Judy's going to report on what happened at the statewide advisory committee meeting that occurred earlier this week. So, you know, I hope that turned out to be an excellent meeting. I can't wait to hear that as well. But in terms of just some of people's comments here, that, you know, here's a comment on how San Diego had said that it would take 6 months to be totally in the program. But Danielle says that she has not experienced that with her other clients. And, you know, I mean, I think in some settings, 6 months, you know, is actually considered, at least for a while there, actually very speedy, but it should not have to take a full 6 months. This should go quicker. And we got a question of here about, I guess, yes, Irene comments, 6 months is fast. And that is sad that it should be fast, but I guess comparatively, relatively speaking, it is. Here is, you know, I think this kind of question has come up quite a bit for us about if your son, in this case, the question is about Alta Regional Center, should you be signing up for SDP now? Is there anything we have to do before July 1st? I mean, as Judy has said before, this is the time at least to look around and look for independent facilitators, get your circle of support ready, get ready to be ready, go through our book and see how you can be ready to start the person-centered planning process. So you can do a lot of prep work before we get access to hopefully the transition money that Judy is confident will be there. You were pretty confident, Judy. I think
I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident, not 100%. Okay. Sorry, everybody, for the interruption. I'm hoping it will not happen again. All right. So did we get through the whole chart? Should I take it down?
I think we can take it down unless people, I mean, we were getting a lot of questions about, well, there were some on ALTA and just some more specific things about how difficult it is sometimes with the local advisory committees and having regional center staff there, that is sometimes inhibiting.
Right. Got it. Okay. So, oh yeah. So let me report on the meeting, and there's some people here who are also at that meeting on Tuesday, but the statewide self-determination advisory committee met on Tuesday. So that's the chairs or co-chairs of the 21 self-determination local committees. And there were supposed to be 4 panels, one from DDS, one from regional centers, one from independent facilitators, and one from financial management services. And unfortunately, DDS did not send any representative, not a single representative. And it was really quite shocking, considering the role of the statewide advisory committee is to advise the department, the DDS, about how to implement the program. And they were not there. And the whole point of that meeting was to give them advice. So that was disappointing. The reason that they didn't come was because of everything in the self-determination program kind of being up in the air right now. And so, they felt that they didn't have answers. And what we've said for many years is, it's okay if you can't give us all the answers. Just show up. Just listen to us so that you are educated. So anyway, so there was no DDS. There was an interesting panel of regional center folks, and I just want to report who they were. I have to find them. Hold on a moment, people. Because I have the names. There it is. Okay, hold on. I'll give you, because I remember some, but I want to make sure I have them all. Okay, so they included Gabby Olmstead from San Diego Regional Center, who's like, I think she's the director of community services or something. Kevin Haynes from Inland Regional Center, Larry Landauer, who's the executive director of Orange County Regional Center, Jennifer Bloom from Alta Regional Center, and Mitchie Gates, who's the executive director of Kern Regional Center. And I mean, any of you who are there are welcome to chime in. But I would say that that I was a little disappointed that the regional centers weren't really held accountable for how things are going. There was a lot of finger pointing at DDS by all of them, saying we need more direction, we need more clarity, we can't do anything until we get that. 3 out of 5 of the regional centers represented are really low performing regional centers in the self-determination program. And so it was a little bit disappointing that there was no specificity from those staff to say how they're going to improve the situation at those regional centers. Does anybody else want to add anything about what was said by them? Okay. So then there was a panel of independent facilitators who kind of spoke about the challenges that they see. And I would say that nothing that was said there would surprise any of you here, that there's a lot of, sort of micromanaging of spending plans. Some of them complained about having to wait many, many months to get paid by regional centers, that the guest vendorship and the vendorship is like a nightmare at some regional centers. So, there were problems. I brought up sort of the disparity issues. How do we ensure that underserved communities have independent facilitators who know their communities? And, there's some efforts being made in that regard. We then had a panel of 5 FMS representatives, and they talked a lot about some of the similar issues. They're very concerned about the spending plans, that there will be spending plans that are absolutely approved by a regional center, and then they go and pay for an expense. And then when they bill the regional center for the expense that had already been, regional centers don't approve the spending plan. Let me make that very clear. But in their world, they approved it. In their world, they signed it, right? So you would think in their world, things are okay. And they passed that spending plan on to the FMS. The FMS spends the money and then bills the regional center, and then they're not getting paid for that service. They're not getting paid back. So now the FMS is out sometimes thousands of dollars. One FMS told me that they're out over $100,000 from one regional center, from various clients, that the regional center is questioning the expenses, even though they were in the spending plan that was given to the FMS. So you should know that some FMSs are not taking new clients, which is really bad news for all of you who are trying to go in on July 1st. It just means that your choices are much fewer. There's currently, I think, 9 FMSs vendored throughout the state. Some of them are vendored. There are some regional centers that only have 4 or 5 FMSs vendored there. And so if one of them is Aviana is not taking any new clients. So it's so now you have even fewer. And community interfaces is another one not taking new clients. I don't believe 24-hour care is taking new clients. So of the 8 or 9, you have very few that are actually continuing to take new clients. So that's obviously an issue that has got to be addressed, and DDS is aware of it, and we'll see what happens. There's some things that are supposed to come out in the budget, and we'll see. So what can I tell you that came out of that meeting? Not a whole lot, except to meet more and to meet with DDS. I recommended that since DDS said we can't meet before July 1st, we have a special meeting in July with DDS for them to explain what their plans are to take this program to where it needs to be. So are there questions about any of those things that I talked about?
Well, there's a lot of questions related to, I mean, we can, I think maybe not so much directly about the statewide meeting, but starting to, there's a lot of questions about, what people can do now, asking for certified budgets, things like that.
So there is this one question that just came in. Can you share a little bit about the fast track they were talking about yesterday?
Right.
So, so that is something that's happening specifically at Kern Regional Center. I don't know if other regional centers are calling it that, but that is something that is happening there, where they have hired like an independent facilitator type firm who are literally working directly with the participant and their family and saying, what is it you need to move into the program? We will, hold your hands and we'll try to get you in. I think they have like a 30-day period or something to fast track people in, to break down all the barriers and move them in. So, that is something that you should be talking to your local advisory committees to recommend. That each local advisory committee has money that they can spend on helping participants move into the program. And so and they're about to get new monies again after July 1st. So, Cindy Cox is saying, because she's at that regional center, the fast track is an RFP that her company and another independent facilitator are doing for Kern. So I don't know, Cindy, are you interested in just kind of explaining it for a moment? Because I can find you and ask you to unmute. So go ahead, Cindy, if you're in a place where you can talk.
Hi, you guys. I apologize. I don't have my camera on.
No worries.
So there was we did an RFP for Kern Regional about 6 months ago, and we tried to think about what are the barriers from stopping these clients who have been selected, right? What's the barrier from stopping them? And what we found was that really what they needed was someone to just talk with them and say, what are your barriers? What do you need? How can we get you there? And what we told Kern is, if they will give us the freedom, right, to not be a barrier. In other words, Kern won't be a barrier, right? Mm-hmm. We will go individually to these families and we will start moving them through in 30 days. Now that 30 days sometimes comes up to be about 45 days, but as long as the family or the client, I should say, is willing, you can move this through pretty quick, right? So it's been a success with Kern. I would love for the other regional centers to take a look at the structure of how we did it. It doesn't make us wonderful and all that in a bag of chips. But what it does mean is that what people want is they want someone to talk to, right? They want someone to say, help me get through this. What can I do? And regional center cannot be the barrier. And so it's been a pretty successful, I think, a pretty successful thing. But Judy, the other thing I just have to say, and that has come up, it came up through the fast track, but also came up today in 2 separate incidences that had nothing to do with fast track from other regional centers besides Kern. I know you've spoke of it before. I'm just going to throw this out there to anybody who's listening. We got 2 referrals from regional centers that they had clients that have a person-centered plan, the whole 9 yards, but they don't have a spending plan. They're not, they don't have a certified budget. They just have the person-centered plan. And when we ask the question, how much of that $2,500 is left? The answer is zero. So they spent $2,500 to write a 2-page person-centered plan, dropped the client, and said, okay, good luck. And then, then we get the phone call, can you help get them over the goal line? And how are we going to bill any of our services? We can't, because somebody took the money, right? So I guess my appeal to everybody is 2 things, is with this $2,500 that may be coming up, my advice is don't hire somebody who's going to do a person-centered plan for you. Basically bill out that whole $2,500 and leave you with the paper that you have to do by yourself. You do yourself, you really paint yourself into a corner. And second, if you're one of those people that is doing that, knock it the hell off, right? It is morally wrong for you to be doing that. You're expecting other people to carry these people across the finish line, which we want to do, right? But you can't do it with everybody if other people are going to take it. So I'm off my soapbox. The fast track works. We're always happy to help people. I know that for so many of you on here, your heart is in the right place. So I think I've talked enough. I went down the rabbit hole a little bit. Sorry, Judy.
Thank you for doing that. I'm having some issues in my family, everybody. So I apologize that I'm not paying the kind of attention I need to, but you all get it. You all get it. So yeah, I totally agree that you as participants and as family members, you need to really make sure that you're not, people shouldn't be spending that much money on the actual person-centered plan. You need to save some of that $2,500 to do other important things like, I don't know, like the spending plan and stuff. I'm sorry, I'm so distracted. You got to keep me focused, Nina.
Okay. Well, here there's a series of questions throughout that are.
And some people have their hands up too.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly, just because this kind of relates to the, you know, that 2,500, but it's a little bit general, and it's a lot about independent facilitators. So there's questions, and I know there's tons of people on the call who can jump in and respond to this. There's questions about how do I find an IF? How do I become an IF? But there's also a more specific question of, can you use an IF that's out of state?
Yes. Yes, you can. I used an IF that's out of state. So the answer would be yes.
Okay.
They have to meet certain qualifications. It can't be, you know, some random person living in Las Vegas, but it has to be a person. I mean, I used an out-of-state person who's one of the best person-centered planners in the country. So, you know, here's the thing, guys, our person-centered planner only led the person-centered plan. You know, we paid out of pocket to fly her in. So she was doing it in person pre-COVID. Now that everything's kind of online, well, things may not be online so much anymore, but if you were going to do it on Zoom, it doesn't really matter where they're coming in from, right? But when it comes to creating the spending plan, you need a local person. You need a person who truly understands the self-determination program. And so this person did not help us with that piece. Okay. So you have to make sure you understand what you're doing. It's very complicated. Some of the rules are overly complicated, more complicated than they need to be. And so you as a participant just need to like forget about all those details, hire the right person to help you who understands those details to make it happen. Okay. Let's let Jordan's had his hand up for a long time. So go ahead.
Thank you, Judy.
Great.
I want to cut down a couple of things you said. Number one, you mentioned about IFs not getting paid, and though you know, they should be paid, I'm not surprised because PCP, person-centered planners, were not getting paid. Every time I go to meetings, I hear we haven't been paid from Regional Center. So even those people aren't getting money, and now I'm hearing, so there's a problem with payments that need to be addressed. Also, to what Harvey mentioned about regional centers and the Lanterman being, you know, 21 separate regional centers, that may be true, but what they're doing in Kern County, the fast track, that's great for Kern County, but how does it help somebody over here in, you know, in Antelope Valley or somebody in Santa Barbara? How does it help somebody else? So, you know, then she said, well, they could discuss it. That's what they do. That's what we do in the United States. We go to a committee and we spend 6 months to a year in a committee, and we come out with a name of what we're going to call it. And then somewhere a year from now, it may pass if enough people agree to it, or they just forget about it. So it would be nice for regional centers, in my mind, to, you know, work together. So we, you know, because when you look outside of the state, people look at self-determination as a state thing. They don't look at it. People from, as you mentioned, Nevada won't look at regional center as, oh, there's 21 separate. They look at it as the California, and if it fails, then California failed. It wouldn't say, oh, well, Kern succeeded and San Diego failed and IC definitely failed. They're looking at it as the whole program failed. So somehow regional center needs to have a network where they work together, because, you know, it shouldn't matter where I do my self-determination training. It shouldn't matter if I do it at my regional center or I do it at Westside or I do it over here, but they seem to have this feeling that if you don't do it at your own regional center, you don't stick within your community, then very upsetting. Because I know some of the regional centers, you could do the training online, and some of them make you do it in person. So how is that fair to people who want to go in person and can't, or people who want to do it online have to do it on the Zoom for 5 hours, where other people can get it done in an hour through a video?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it fair. It doesn't make it doesn't make it right. So.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Those are excellent points, Jordan. Jordan, by the way, is a member of the local advisory committee at North LA Regional Center. So if any of you ever want to go to their meeting, they have a great meeting. I went to it last week. Even though you weren't there, John, Jordan did a great job in your absence running the meeting. It was a great meeting. Tammy Bradley. Go ahead and unmute, Tammy.
Okay, there. Okay, it wasn't working at first. I was curious, I'm a regional center client of Alta, and I'm really interested in knowing about the person-centered planning. I took a person-centered thinking class. So is that the same principle for this quote PCP, or is there a template or a application or any something that you can use to create your own? I feel like I could probably do that. And that would save some of that funding like you're talking about.
Right. So first of all, there's lots in there that I want to talk about.
Okay.
So first of all, it's that $2,500 does not come out of your budget. So when we say save it, it doesn't mean that you could then spend that money on services and supports and activities and goods and things you want to do. That $2,500 is only for people entering the program for the very first time. So my feeling is, regardless of how skilled you are, like I helped write the self-determination law. Connie and Harvey helped to write the self-determination law, and we all hired independent facilitators to lead the person-centered planning for our kids, our adult children, because we know that we're too close to them. We're too close to our sons, and you are seriously close to yourself.
See, so that's exactly what I was thinking too. Like, yeah. I know myself, but maybe I'm not thinking outside the box. I have your book. So
right. And there are actually some amazing independent facilitators who specialize in adults who are adult consumers, adult participants who are, pretty independent, don't rely on their family, who maybe don't even want the family at the person-centered planning meeting. So there are some really great facilitators out there who focus on that. And I would suggest, they can put their names in the chat if that's something they're interested in. So that was one thing you said. You wanted to know some good information. So first of all, hold on, as I do every week, we have 2 great books on our website. Have you put that in there in the chat yet, Christina? So we have this book called Think Outside the Box. In it, it has some really great, it has everything you need to know about the self-determination program, including how to pick an independent facilitator, questions you can ask them. We have pre-plan, we have worksheets on person-centered planning. We have, we also have a checklist of things that you should be doing to move into the program. So there's all great. We have a second book too called Profiles and Self-Determination, which is an easy little paperback, which has examples of people who are in the pilot, as well as the pilot from the last 20 years, as well as people who are moving into the program now. There's also a really great book called, hold on, it's in our resources section. It's such a great book. Connie and Harvey, I'm going to unmute you to remind me the name of it. What is that great book that the
it's from Minnesota.
Right, it's from Minnesota.
It's free.
What is it called?
Oh God, she's getting it. It's right over
here. No, I'll find it for you.
Over here in our very organized room.
It's called, I got it.
Yay.
It's called It's My Choice.
It's My Choice. Put it in front of your chest. Stand. We can't see it because of your background. There we go. It's My Choice. You can get that free online. So if you Google, in fact, Christina, maybe you can do this for me. Google It's My Choice Minnesota Developmental Disabilities Council. And we have a bunch of them printed. Casey has it too. The most amazing book. And it is available free online. It's also free to receive, except I believe that they stopped doing it sending them out during COVID. But it has charts and graphs and questions for you to ask. It's so person-centered.
You know what it is? It's like a workbook.
It is.
It is everything you would want.
It's really good. And I plan, if someone will come, to give, I got a lot of them, give it to DVU and give them out free to people.
Yeah.
It will help you.
Yeah.
I promise that.
It's a great book.
And Tammy, when you want to, it just gives you the information to ask yourself as a person or even as a family member, how do you begin? What do you think about? It's fabulous. And the person that wrote it is amazing. She's from,
most of the people in that book are Californians.
Yeah, we start looking at who wrote it.
It's a lot of them are from Northern California, And the bottom line, Californians wrote the damn thing. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like we don't know.
Yeah, it was written in California, even though it was published by the Minnesota State Council.
Right.
Her name is Colleen Wick.
Colleen, great person.
Yeah. So that is a great resource for all of you. Let's go to Sandra. Go ahead, Sandra.
So the out-of-state IF, there is something that just came up this week. Not my client, somebody else's client wanted to do a music therapy class that happens. The vendor is in Arizona, but the self-determination participant is in California. It's over Zoom. What does it matter where the vendor is?
Exactly.
They were denied.
Oh my God.
They were denied. I have a sex educator that's written books that I want to use for my son, who is in Wisconsin, and she does, she actually comes here.
Who she is.
Yes, you do. Everybody does. And she has a sister in Huntington Beach, so she comes here. So it's not, it will be some in person, some on Zoom. Can't do it because there's some freaking statute that says they got to be here. They've got to be some California address for the billing.
Okay, so that's another direct question that needs, so here's what I would do in the meantime. I always see the rules, and then this is the way my parents raised me. How do you get around the rules? First you try to get around the rules, then you try to change the rules. So here's what I would do for those of you who are having issues. So first of all, you should know I had no problems getting our independent facilitator from Michigan paid for. But I have to say that was sort of early on, and maybe they now are clamping down. But if your people have any way to get an address in California, just use that address in California. Okay. It's not like they just have to be able to receive everything's through email nowadays. But if they have to receive mail, they have a friend or a family member in the California, just get a damn address. So that's the way I'd get around it. Hold on, just need to check somebody. Okay. Why don't we go to some things in the chat? I know there's been a ton of stuff in the chat, Nina. So
yes, we have a question from John Francis, who is sharing that at yesterday's SSCAC meeting, that asking for your opinion about the idea that regional centers across the state are meeting with each other on issues, and mention best practices. This leaves the local advisory committees out of the loop. That is, if we don't get updates from our own regional center on decisions being made. Did you have any thoughts on that, Judy?
Can I find it? Because I got a little lost in it. Do you want to paraphrase it?
Yeah, I think that this idea that regional centers are meeting with each other,
right. And that happens all the time. Are you kidding? It doesn't matter what the issue is. The regional centers meet with each other all the time. That's not in itself a bad thing, people. Regional centers should be exchanging information, working consistently across the state. I would hope that would be happening, right? Because we are not supposed to have 21 different DD systems. This is a statewide system. So the fact that they're meeting with each other about the self-determination program does not bother me in the least bit. What bothers me is when if regional centers meet together and all decide together to start denying us things. It's like for them to look at the regional center with the most restrictive interpretation of the self-determination program, and everybody just moves in that direction, as opposed to the most progressive interpretation of the self-determination program, and they all move in that direction. What we heard at the meeting on yesterday, I guess, over and over and over again was, we're afraid of getting audited. We're afraid of getting audited. And that means that the state will come in and say you shouldn't have spent money this way, and therefore the regional center has to pay out of their operations funding as opposed to being able to use purchase of service dollars. So they're all worried about auditing. Well, this is where it falls on DDS, that if they're worried about getting audited, DDS has to tell them not to worry about getting audited, or if they should be worried, to provide them with more clear direction. We've been hearing from DDS for weeks now that there will be, since May 15th, so over a month, when the May revision came out on May 14th, we heard that there was going to be an SDP plan, and that SDP plan has never been produced. So, I'm assuming that SDP plan is going to be answering some of these questions, but who the heck knows, right? All right, what are some other questions?
Well, I think we have, you've covered actually quite a bit, and the great IFs in here are giving a lot of information, and the information about the books, and especially the Minnesota book, I think it helps to answer a lot of questions, because there are questions like, who does the spending plan? And I think all those resources will make it very clear about how you put together a spending plan. But did you want to point out any just sort of a little bit of process about spending plans and some of the pitfalls there?
Yeah, so, I've been saying this all along, and I think that once July 1st hits, I think we're going to start from the beginning and just start explaining the self-determination program like we started a year ago. I should remind everybody that all of the SDP Connects we've ever had, we're probably at about 30 of them now, are all living on our website, theinterchange.org. We have 2 of them, and choose the one on self-determination and find our SDP Connects, and you'll see all those recordings. If you go back to the very, very first one, it's about unmet need and developing your individual budget. I believe the next week was about spending plan development. So we spent an entire hour and a half just talking about that. In some cases, we talked for 2 hours. So I recommend you go back and do that, because we're probably not going to get through all of it before then. But the key thing about spending plan is that regional centers, they're not supposed to approve the spending plan, but they're supposed to review the spending plan. And they're reviewing it for 3 things. Number 1, to make sure that the service or good or item or activity is is eligible for federal funding. There are, in this wonderful book I told you about, it lists all of the things that can be used, and there's 26 pages of it. So most things really fall in there. Second, they make sure that you tried to get what's called generic resources, paying for it first. So that means you can't ask for tutoring without asking the school district for that first. You can't ask for speech therapy without asking your insurance company or Medi-Cal to pay for that first. Once you get denials from those generic resources, then you can put them in your spending plan. The third thing is that all services must be fully integrated into the community or be in your home. They need to follow what's called the Home and Community-Based Services Final Rule, which, by the way, goes into effect in March of 2023 for all people, regardless of whether you are in the self-determination program. So if you're putting in your spending plan, going to a segregated day program where you sit in a building all day long and surrounded only by people who are regional center clients and paid staff, that is not going to fly. That is not going to be, I don't know why anybody would want to do that with your self-determination funds, but if you want to do that, that's going to be a problem. And so you have to be able to show the regional center, or the provider has to be able to show the regional center how you as a participant will be able to have free choice and control over your life, even though you're in a very segregated program. And that means if you don't feel like going that day, that you can do something else, that you don't, that you can eat when you want, you can be supported, you get to choose the staff who supports you. So that's kind of important. Those are the only 3 ways that they can review your spending plan and send back questions. So I'll give you an example. So we just went into our 2nd year for my son. We are using an agency for one service. Everybody else we're hiring directly, but for one service, we're using a traditional agency, an agency that provides services through the traditional system. And so their name was on there, and the regional center called me and said, what kind of service are you getting? Because they actually run a day program. They run social skills programs. They run sort of a lot of group activities. And I was able to say, oh, no, all we're getting is one particular staff being a personal trainer 1 hour a week. So that's all that is. And it's a one-on-one personal, it's like exercise stuff. And they were like, okay, that's fine. So that's an example of a traditional group service provider who's providing a service that is clearly integrated, because anything that is individualized is considered integrated. All right.
Okay.
So should we go to Bertha Suazo? I hope I'm saying your name right.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Berta Suazo y estoy muy preocupada con la comunidad hispana porque mi comunidad es la que menos servicios obtiene. Aunque los pidan, nunca los reciben. ¿Qué es lo que va a pasar con nuestra comunidad hispana?
Is that all? Okay. So for those of you, okay.
Estoy muy, okay, está bien.
Yeah. I was just typing this in the chat. For you English speakers out there, you have to make sure to pick a language, or else all you did is just hear Spanish. But if you click at the bottom under interpretation and choose English, you will have heard Lorna say everything in English. So just be sure you do that for the future. What is going to happen with the Hispanic community? It is a profound priority for us at DVU. You saw earlier Fernando Gomez, who is our vice president and one of our co-founders, who also runs an organization that works directly with the Latino community. We spend a lot of our time training. We spend a lot of our time representing and going to IPPs and going to and speaking to regional centers on behalf of all underserved communities, not just the Hispanic community, but also African Americans and Asians who have traditionally suffered from great disparities in the traditional system. And what we are seeing in the initial data, you saw earlier that there were 588 people in the program. And what we're seeing is that they do not reflect the ethnic makeup of the state. That in fact, Latinos and African Americans are coming in at half the rate of what they should be in the program. Asians are actually doing pretty well and moving into the program at about the same pace as whites. And they're both a little bit overrepresented, but Hispanics and African Americans are equally not doing well moving into the program. So there's a lot that needs to be done. I've been involved. DVU and the Autism Society of Los Angeles has trained hundreds of independent facilitators around the state who speak languages other than English, so that whether you need a Spanish speaking facilitator or Armenian or Korean or Japanese, we've trained a lot of people to become facilitators so that everybody has that access. So that's a key thing. We also have to make sure that regional centers are following the law when they're interacting with you. I keep hearing ridiculous stories about South Central Regional Center. So for those of you from South Central, if you are being told by your regional center that to get respite in your budget, that you have to produce a doctor's note with all of your medications, that's just not true. That is absolutely not true unless you are asking for nursing services. Like if you're asking specifically for nursing services, yes, you will need a doctor's note. But if you're asking for basic respite, which is kind of like babysitting, and respite is a service that is used significantly by people of color, and so or people who have younger children. And so you do not need to jump through hoops to get respite. It should be a standard thing based on your need. I'm actually have written to DDS to try to get involved at South Central Regional Center to correct them, because they're actually reading the law. I read the law and what they're referring to, and they're just absolutely reading the law incorrectly. So yes, it is a struggle. It is a struggle to make sure that this program is rolled out equitably. It's a very big struggle, and it's a great, great concern of ours. Thank you for your question.
Sí, sí, también quería comentar que ella es del Centro Regional del Sur Centro y yo he tratado de ayudarla y pedir los servicios y siempre nos han negado los servicios. Ella tiene su hijo con autismo y tiene otros problemas de deshabilidad, como del corazón también tiene muchos problemas y nunca le han querido dar ningún servicio. Nunca. Es más, solicitamos el servicio para ser independiente y no se lo quisieron dar, que tenía que esperar hasta el mes de julio, que es lo que estamos esperando en este momento, a ver qué es lo que va a pasar. Porque él nunca recibió nada. El hijo de ella no ha recibido nada desde ni en la pandemia ni hasta hoy día, no recibe nada.
How old is he?
29 años.
I never received a service. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, Fernando, would you mind putting a contact information for the ICC in the chat? Because I would love to get you connected to them or others who work in the South Central area. If any of you independent facilitators also work in the South Central area, please, please put your names, your contact information in the chat. Let's try to make sure that we get you help, okay? You should know that DBU does not really take individual clients. We're a very small organization, and we generally work to try to help the whole program to change policy. But we work, our sister organization and the ICC and other groups who do amazing work with underserved communities, we are happy to refer you. So you'll see if Fernando put their email address in the chat. Anyone else who is able to potentially help this family, please do that. Okay, please write that down. Put it down. Okay, thank you for joining us. Carl.
Gracias.
Gracias. De nada. I'm my Spanish here.
Hi, thank you, Judy. I would just like to make a few comments regarding services for the deaf community, because we view self-determination as, you know, a sea change for the deaf community. And I'm sure many people in the group today are aware of this, but for those who are not, you know, I've been fighting DDS for the past 20 years regarding getting services for my deaf children. And I wonder how many people in the group are aware that just last year, Disability Rights California filed a class action lawsuit against DDS on behalf of my children and 4,998 other deaf clients seeking proper services for the deaf community. So I would just like to make you aware that in DDS's latest response, which is on my blog, I'll put a link in a moment, DDS's response for not providing services through their regional centers for the deaf community was that, oh gee, it's not DDS's job, it's the regional center's job. And so you can't file a class action lawsuit against DDS, you have to go after the regional centers. Well, guess what? The federal district court rejected that And so this class action lawsuit is now in progress. However, we have had the May budget update. And in that May budget update, there's significant funding for services for the deaf community. I will be putting up a blog post, and the thrust of my blog post is that is not services. Those are not services targeted to the deaf community. Those are services targeted to sabotage the class action lawsuit. In fact, the services that are needed for the deaf community are things like deaf service coordinators and deaf vendors, and those are not what DDS is proposing funding for. So I'm going to have a blog post up. In the meantime, I'm going to put in chat my latest blog post on retaliation. And then if you click on the blog in general, you'll see an update for the class action lawsuit. So thank you for giving me a few minutes to bring this to the attention of the group.
Always, Carl. I think it is so important for us to hear from you, Carl, because it's not, you know, we spend a lot of our time thinking of disparities as in just, you know, the context of race, which is obviously hugely important. But there are other groups who are also not being served, such as, you know, clients who are blind, clients who are deaf, clients who are non-speaking, who need communication supports in some kind of way. Clients who are in those, you know, very, very segregated institutional settings like intermediate care facilities, but really should be getting out and living in the community. So there's a whole bunch of communities that are critical for us to care about. And, you know, it's hard because I would love to meet, honestly, a whole bunch of people, and maybe you're here, a whole bunch of people who are being perfectly served by their regional centers and things are going great for you. Because I want to meet those, because I want to hear how that happened. Like what things came into place for you to support you. You had obviously a great service coordinator, and you had a leadership at your regional center to ensure that you could get that support. And you have maybe you're a person that doesn't go into crisis all the time, and so your needs are pretty basic. I mean, I would love to hear what, or maybe you are a person in crisis and your regional center has really been there for you. So I love to hear those stories, because that means that we need to replicate those stories, right? And it's not that no one is being well served at the regional center. There are definitely people being well served, but let's find out who they are and how that happened so that other people can have the same thing happen to them. Lourdes, and then we'll go to a few questions in the chat. Oh, you're not unmuted. Hold on. There we go. Go ahead, Lourdes.
I just want to say that, you know, ARCA and some regional center are still sending emails about calling Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, Senate President Pro Tempore Anthony Atkin, and the governor, even to the point that they actually sent the email with the wrong phone numbers. But those are the things. I mean, we do need to come together and keep on making those phone calls. I know I've been harassing those offices because I want to make sure that they understand that that is not what my family needs, and that's not the right thing. And they did it the wrong way, because I know a lot of families sign up and say, hey, we do want bigger budgets. We do want the recreational services back. I believe we spoke about this like 10 days with you in Disability Voices United. And then 10 days after they started putting that out, we all thought it was like, you know, you guys have negotiated something with regional centers or something, that they were finally hearing the voice of, we need recreational services back. And I signed up for it, and I'm really pissed off. It bothers me a lot that I you know, they're keeping all of that money for 3 things, and recreational services is 1 week at the year that they get to go on summer. I never had that service, so I thought I was speaking to a mom and she told me, like, I was like, okay, it's 10 weeks, it's summer, so they're gonna have summer camp for 10 weeks, which is what the time that they're off on summer camp. And she's like, no, it's like regional center, if you're lucky and you have a good service coordinator, will pay 1 week of summer camp.
Right.
And I'm like, and they're gonna take all of those millions and billions of dollars, and my child gets 1 week a year for recreational services, and they're taking everything else. How is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. And most regional centers have not paid for any kind of recreational anything. So it is, I haven't decided how I'm going to react to when the budget comes out, because I don't know what the budget's going to be. But I have said to legislative staff, and I'll say it here in front of the 131 people, that if at the end of the day, what comes out in the budget is that service providers are getting massive rate increases with no ties to accountability and outcomes, and regional centers are getting huge amounts of money for more service coordinators, and we're getting little crumbs of, little bits of money here and there, it will, number one, show how powerless we are, and we should take that as a challenge. And number two, we have to hold the legislature and the governor accountable for that, for them to have created a deal where all of our priorities do not get funded, or most of our priorities. I'm sure we're going to get something, guys. I know that would be impossible for you to imagine that they would give all this money and then give the community, deny us social rec restoration or deny us some of the SDP money. But we will see. You will certainly, if you make sure you're on our email list at DVU, and you'll be getting our statement as soon as we know what's in there. I wanted to give Sean Costello a chance. He's been private messaging me to make sure he wanted to give a statement. Go ahead, Sean. Can you unmute, Sean? There you go.
My raised hand thing was not lit, so I could not raise my hand. So I've been yelling and screaming and hollering for an hour.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. Go ahead.
I want you all to be recognize something of a scam that might happen to you that happened to me. A few years ago, I had a brand new social worker. My in-home supportive lady, she had to go to the hospital and had her leg cut off for some reason, and her daughter was going to take over, and the lady that was taking over the night shift came over and stole all of her hours and forced me to sign this paper. And the social worker that I had said that I had to do this, and I go, no way. I did it anyway. I lost my great friends that were helping me, and I fired the company and I fired my social worker because they had told me lies like crazy to make me sign this paper to sign away my ages as hours of my person that I like so much. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want this to happen to anybody else here. So it is possible that if you're going to get providers that you're going to have with this self-determination, that you might get some fake people out there that just want the money and not going to give you any services, not going to let you do anything. Like this lady that took all the money, she put me into these programs I went and spent all my time going all the way to Oakland in my wheelchair. And when I got there, she did not allow me to teach anybody the computer. And she goes, I'm gonna pay you to tutor all these clients of mine that want to learn the computer. I go all the way down there and nobody was ready. Nobody wanted to learn. She goes, oh, it was just a joke on you. I know.
So Sean, I just want to clarify that when you're saying social worker, you mean the regional center service coordinator, correct? So that's a really excellent point. I want everyone here to know, Sean talked about the fact that he fired his service coordinator. They call them social workers, case managers. You can do that, everybody. In the Lanterman Act, it says that if you do not like your service coordinator, you can ask for a choice of other service coordinators. And I have heard people too many times say to me, oh, my service coordinator is useless. So you have a right to ask for a new one. And if you are not being given another person, then you should file a complaint with DDS. So Sean is a great example of how that can happen, particularly now when you're entering the self-determination program. You may end up having a service coordinator who knows nothing about the program and who is basically saying to you, well, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. It's like you can demand, I want a service coordinator who has experience with the self-determination program. You can ask for that. And they are required to provide you with an experienced service coordinator in your area. So if you end up having problems with that, I mean, these are problems that don't lie in self-determination. They lie in our rights in the Lanterman Act. And so we have to make sure to abide by that. I'm going to move on, Sean, because we have a million questions in the chat. Thank you so much. Always, every week. Nina, what other questions are in there?
Oh, we've got a group of questions that relate to service providers. So there's one is a comment / question, and then there's a specific question as well from Christina. This has come up several times, and that is, what about when service providers are charging more for participants in self-determination than in the vendorized rate? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that came up yesterday. So there is no rule about service. Sunny has had her hands up, so I'm going to mute her. First of all, there's no rule that says they cannot do that, by the way. And that is why it is up to you and your independent facilitator to be negotiating these rates. Now, personally, I've been able to negotiate a rate. Remember I told you about that service provider that we're using to do something different than what they normally do? We've been able to negotiate a rate slightly lower than their rate that they have for the regional center because there's no reports. Billing is literally so easy. They just send an invoice to my FMS once a month and it's paid in within 2 weeks. So their lives are actually better as a company serving a self-determination client than they are in the traditional system. So we were able to negotiate a slightly lower rate for that. In some cases, the rate may be higher. So let's say that you're using an independent living service, traditional provider, which we are as well. So I guess we're actually using two service providers now that I think about it, but we're not using them to provide the traditional kind of ILS services. They're not sending a person into our home for 10 hours a week to work with my son on, washing the dishes and doing laundry. We don't want any of that. We really want to think globally about how my son can really have a life in the community where he's in charge and has more independence and interdependence. And that requires us to have actually a higher level of service provider than the person who would come into our home. So our rate is actually 5 times the amount for this service provider than their traditional hourly rate. But of course, instead of using, let's say, 10 hours a week that you would with a traditional service provider, we're only using 2 or 3, I think, hours a month of this more high-level service provider. So it's costing us actually less on an annual basis, but on an hourly rate, it's costing us more. So if you're looking at a service provider providing the exact same services they were in the traditional system, exactly the same, it is outrageous if they're charging you more. But if they're providing a sort of a higher level, more specialized level of service, a more intensive, you may need to negotiate a higher rate. Or if they're providing exactly the same, you could make an argument for the rate to be lower because they're not having to write reports. So go ahead, Sunny.
Thanks, Judy. I saw this comment and it was specifically in the chat about Harbor Regional Center and that this happening at Harbor. And I just wanted to, so I've experienced this with some of our clients at Harbor and at other regional centers too. But at Harbor specifically, there's been some talk amongst service providers, with some service providers telling other service providers that it's going to be really hard for you to take clients in self-determination. It's all this extra paperwork and a bunch of things that are not true. And so when this came up with one of our clients, that a service that they've had for a long time and want to continue, wanted to charge them more, we had a meeting with the service provider and we said, tell us, what you're thinking on this and why you think you're going to charge more. And they said, well, this other provider told us that it's going to be all this extra work, and that other provider had never served anyone in the self-determination program. So it's just rumors, it's misinformation being spread. But we were able to correct it by having a meeting and having a conversation and with the FMS and explaining how it all works and explaining how actually it's easier. And so I think, so I guess my advice is, even if that's someone's initial reaction, they might have been given some information that's wrong. So we can always have a meeting with, with service providers and talk with them and explain the process, and an independent facilitator in your FMS can help with that. So don't get afraid if someone says, oh, we want to charge you this, and then, oh, forget it, now I'm stuck. It might require you to educate the service provider a little bit too and fill them in, and that we've had success doing that.
That is super helpful. That is super helpful. I can say also that a lot of we've been hearing, I heard this at the North LA Regional Center meeting last week that Jordan was leading. And John, I wanted to mention it to you that there was a person who is a participant who spoke about the fact that they can't get their traditional service providers to even agree to provide services. So it's not even about the rate. It's that they're saying, no, we don't want to have anything to do with self-determination. So there needs to be a lot of education. And that's a great role of local advisory committees to, I can tell you, Connie and Harvey in particular has been meeting with traditional service providers for years, since 2013 when the law passed, to say this is a really good thing for you, because so much, service providers have to send, I can't remember what it's called, but they have to send something to regional centers, which is kind of like their plan, the way that they're going to conduct services for that regional center. And it is so absolutely in a box. It's so narrow. And I've had really outside the box thinking service providers say, God, I wish we could do this or that with your son. Program design. Thank you, Sunny. And it's like, there's no program design. It's person-centered, right? So it's all about us. We don't have to fit into their program design. Their program has to fit into what works for us. That is the profound difference in the self-determination program. So guys, it is almost 6 o'clock and I unfortunately really need to get off because I'm having some family stuff going on that I need to attend to. So I know that I know that we always save these chats, and we'll make sure that we have, we'll answer some of these questions next week. We will definitely be meeting again next week, and we will try to address these. We will also definitely know by next week what happened in the budget. And please make sure you're on our mailing list so that we will put it out in an email when we know what happens. I think we're going to probably know by Friday, if I had to guess. So thank you to Nina for being the chat manager and for leading part of the meeting when I couldn't. And thank you to Christina for being Ed Jr. And thank you all for coming. It is very always enriching every week to see all your faces and to think and to have you really embrace self-determination, which is, you know, we think of it as our little baby. So we hope to see you guys next week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.